Minnesota is often called the land of 10,000 lakes, but that's a massive understatement. Behind that quiet, Midwestern exterior is a landscape that defies logic. It's a place where the water is so vast, this landlocked state actually has more shoreline than the entire Pacific coast of California. It's a land of brutal extremes, where the air can plummet to 60 degrees below zero, colder than the surface of Mars, yet sit atop ancient volcanic rifts and 3-billion-year-old bedrock. From disappearing lakes to forests that grow on floating ground, we've collected 50 insane facts about Minnesota you've probably never heard of before. And we're counting them down, starting right now. Fact 50. Minnesota feels bigger than it is. While it ranks 12th in size among U.S. states, Minnesota possesses a psychological scale that feels infinite. Because the horizon is often defined by water rather than mountains, the sky appears larger here. When you're deep in the North Woods or standing on the edge of the prairie, the sheer lack of vertical boundaries makes the state expand in the mind, creating a sense of isolation that's rare in the modern world. Fact 49. Seasons switch without warning. Minnesota is the ultimate climate seesaw. It's situated at the center of the continent, far from the stabilizing influence of the ocean. This means spring can arrive overnight with a 40-degree jump in temperature, and fall can be erased by a single October blizzard. In Minnesota, the transitions aren't seasons, they're abrupt shifts in reality. Fact 48. The acoustic blanket of snow. Fresh snowfall does more than change the color of the landscape. It changes the physics of sound. Snowflakes are porous, acting as a natural acoustic foam that absorbs sound waves rather than reflecting them. After a heavy Minnesota snowfall, the world enters a state of absolute quiet, where the ambient noise of civilization simply dissolves into the drifts. Fact 47. The accessibility of true solitude. In much of the country, getting away means a crowded hiking trail. In Minnesota's northern reaches, you can walk for hours or paddle for days without seeing another human being. With millions of acres of public land and forests that erase the edge of the map, genuine solitude isn't a luxury here. It's a foundational part of the geography. Fact 46. Water as the great regulator. With over 11,000 lakes, the water in Minnesota acts as a massive thermal battery. In the summer, the lakes absorb heat, keeping the nights cool. In the winter, they release that heat slowly, stretching the season. The water doesn't just sit in the landscape. It sets the biological and thermal pace for every living thing in the state. Fact 45. The climate collision zone. Minnesota sits at the crossguards of 3 distinct air masses: frigid Arctic air from the north, warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico, and dry Pacific air from the west. When these 3 titans meet over the Minnesota plains, weather isn't just happening, it's being born. This makes the state a primary laboratory for some of the most intense storm systems in North America. Fact 44. The geometry of frozen art. When Minnesota lakes freeze, they don't just turn into flat white sheets. Under the right conditions, the ice forms perfect geometric patterns. Stress cracks radiate like stained glass, and oxygen bubbles get trapped in vertical columns, creating a frozen gallery that looks more like a digital simulation than a natural occurrence. Fact 43. The eternal smolder of peat fires. Northern Minnesota is rich in peat bogs, thick layers of decaying organic matter. During a dry autumn, a fire can move underground, feeding on the carbon-rich peat. These fires can smolder silently all winter long, insulated by a thick layer of snow, only to re-emerge as a forest fire months later when the spring sun arrives. Fact 42. The illusion of suspended fish. In northern lakes like Caribou or Burnside, the water is so low in nutrients and sediment that visibility can exceed 30 feet. When the water is calm, fish appear to be hovering in midair. For boaters, the lack of visual distortion makes the depth feel exposed and dizzying, as if the boat is floating on nothing at all. Fact 41. A landscape in constant flux. Minnesota is geographically restless. Because of its complex hydrology, shorelines migrate slowly over decades. Lakes that were once separate merge into one. Wetlands become forest, and forests become marshes. On a geological scale, Minnesota is a living map that refuses to stay permanent. Now let's turn our focus to Minnesota's deep architecture. Fact 40. The universe sharpens in winter. Cold air holds significantly less moisture than warm air. This means that on a minus 20 degree Fahrenheit night in Minnesota, the atmosphere is at its most transparent. Stars don't just twinkle, they pierce the sky with a clinical brightness. The universe feels closer and sharper because there's literally less stuff in the air between you and the stars. Fact 39. The vertical worlds of deep lakes. Deep Minnesota lakes are stratified, meaning they stack themselves in layers that do not mix. The top layer might be a warm 75 degrees, while just 30 feet down, the water is a staggering 40 degrees. These layers create independent ecosystems where different species of fish live above or below one another in a vertical hierarchy. Fact 38. The ominous green sky. Before a severe storm or tornado, the sky in Minnesota often takes on an eerie, bruised green glow. This happens when the heavy water droplets and hail in the clouds scatter the red light from the sun, leaving only the green wavelengths to pass through. To a Minnesotan, a green sky is the most beautiful warning nature provides. Fact 37. Snow that vanishes into thin air. In the dry, sub-zero air of a Minnesota January, snow often disappears without ever melting into water. This is a process called sublimation, where the ice turns directly into water vapor. You can watch a snowbank shrink over a week of freezing temperatures, a vanishing act performed by the wind and the cold. Fact 36. The power of the ice shove. As lake ice expands and contracts with the sun, it acts like a slow-motion bulldozer. This ice shove can move massive shoreline boulders and snap wooden docks like toothpicks. Over centuries, these cycles have literally rearranged the rocks along the coasts of Minnesota's lakes. Fact 35. When rivers flow backward. During intense gales on Lake Superior or strong winds along the Mississippi, the force of the air can temporarily overcome the current of the water. Rivers have been documented flowing upstream for short periods, a brief moment where the wind forces gravity to take a back seat. Fact 34. The physical weight of silence. In the vast tracts of the North Woods, there are places with 0 decibels of artificial noise. When the wind dies down, the silence becomes so complete that it feels heavy. You can hear the internal sound of your own heartbeat and the rush of blood in your ears, a sensory experience that's nearly impossible to find in the rest of the country. Fact 33. The rolling fog banks of the lakes. When warm air hits the refrigerated surface of a lake, fog forms instantly. These aren't thin mists. They're banks of fog so dense they can hide a 600-foot freighter from view in seconds. The world shrinks to arm's length, turning a familiar lake into a disorienting, whiteout void. Fact 32. Navigation by instinct. When a Minnesota ground blizzard hits, snow is blown horizontally across the roads, erasing the sky, the ground, and the horizon. In these moments, visibility is 0. Longtime residents describe navigating not by sight, but by a feel for the road's crown, a testament to the survival instincts honed by the landscape. Fact 31. The breaking point of steel. In the deep cold, temperatures below -30 degrees Fahrenheit, steel becomes brittle. If not engineered correctly, metal infrastructure can snap under stress rather than bending. Everything in Minnesota, from bridge joints to railroad tracks, is designed with a deep respect for the physical limits of materials in extreme cold. Now, it gets even stranger as we look at Minnesota's ghostly surface. Fact 30. The perfect mirror. Minnesota's 11,000 lakes are often shielded from the wind by thick forests. On a calm morning, the water provides a reflection so perfect it's indistinguishable from the sky. In these moments, the horizon disappears, and if you're in a canoe, you feel as though you're paddling through the clouds themselves. Fact 29. The ancient call of the loon. The common loon is the voice of the Minnesota wilderness. Their haunting, yodeling calls are more than just birdsong. They're structurally complex signals that can carry for miles across the water. The sound is prehistoric and deeply emotional, acting as the soundtrack to the state's identity. Fact 28. Ground that wobbles, the floating bog. Many of Minnesota's northern wetlands are actually floating bogs. These are massive, thick mats of sphagnum moss and vegetation suspended over water. When you walk on them, the ground undulates like a waterbed. It's a disorienting reminder that in Minnesota, solid ground is often an illusion. Fact 27. Horizontal snowfall. Because of the flat prairies in western Minnesota, there's nothing to break the wind. During a storm, snow doesn't fall, it travels sideways. Strong gusts flatten the snowfall into horizontal sheets that can travel for miles without ever touching the ground, turning the air itself into a solid white wall. Fact 26. The silent dance of the aurora. Minnesota is one of the best places in the lower 48 to witness the aurora borealis. Solar storms interact with the Earth's magnetic field, painting the sky in shimmering curtains of neon green and violet. In the winter, the northern lights appear so frequently they're a regular, albeit mystical, part of the night. Fact 25. The hidden life under the ice. While the surface of a lake may be frozen solid, the world below is teeming with life. Oxygen levels are maintained by underwater plants, and fish remain active in the 39-degree water at the bottom. The ice acts as an insulating blanket, ensuring that while the air is deadly, the water remains a sanctuary. Fact 24. The vanishing lakes. In southeastern Minnesota's karst topography, the bedrock is made of soluble limestone. Occasionally, a sinkhole will open up beneath a lake, draining the entire body of water into an underground cavern overnight. One day you have a lake, the next you have a muddy crater and an outdated map. Fact 23. The migration superhighway. Minnesota sits directly on the Mississippi Flyway. Every year, millions of birds, from tiny warblers to massive trumpeter swans, use the state's wetlands as a rest stop. During the peak of migration, the sky is literally written in wings, a massive biological movement that's been happening for millennia. Fact 22. The invisible giants of the marsh. Despite weighing 1,000 pounds and standing 6 feet tall, the Minnesota moose is a master of camouflage. They can stand perfectly still in a willow thicket and remain completely invisible to a person standing just 20 feet away. They're the ghosts of the wetlands, huge, silent, and elusive. Fact 21. The return of the apex predator. In the 1970s, wolves were nearly extinct in the lower 48, except for a small population in northern Minnesota. From that tiny foothold, they have naturally reclaimed their territory. They don't need human reintroduction. They simply walked back to their ancestral roles, proving the resilience of the Minnesota wilderness. Now, we turn our focus to the unique geological memory. Fact 20. The singing ice. When lake ice expands or contracts, it sends vibrations through the sheet that sound like Star Wars laser blasts or metallic singing. This singing ice can be heard from miles away, a haunting, futuristic sound produced by the most primitive of elements. Fact 19. The planet's kidneys. Minnesota's bogs and marshes are more than just swamps. They're the Earth's natural filtration system. A single acre of Minnesota wetland can store over 1 million gallons of floodwater and filter out pollutants, quietly keeping the state's massive water system clean and viable. Fact 18. Geological outsiders, or glacial erratics. Scattered across Minnesota's fields are erratics, massive boulders the size of houses that don't match the local bedrock. These were carried hundreds of miles by glaciers and dropped randomly when the ice melted. They're geological tourists from another era and another place. Fact 17. Walking on deep time. Some of the exposed bedrock in northern Minnesota, like the Morton Gneiss, is 3.5 billion years old. This is among the oldest rock on the entire planet. When you stand on it, you're standing on a piece of the earth that existed before there were trees, before there were dinosaurs, and before there was breathable oxygen. Fact 16. Fire before water. While we think of Minnesota as a land of water, its foundation was built by fire. 1 billion years ago, a massive volcanic rift nearly tore the North American continent apart. The lava from these eruptions cooled to form the rugged basalt cliffs of the North Shore, creating the bowl that now holds Lake Superior. Fact 15. The explosive frostquake. When the temperature drops rapidly, moisture in the soil can freeze and expand instantly, cracking the ground or bedrock. This produces a loud, explosive boom known as a cryoseism or frostquake. They're often mistaken for falling trees or exploding transformers, but it's actually just the Earth itself cracking under the cold. Fact 14. Highways made of ice. In the winter, the lake state adds thousands of miles of roads. Ice becomes thick enough to support semi-trucks. In many northern communities, people commute across the frozen surface of a lake to get to work, trusting in the physics of 24 inches of ice to hold them over the abyss. Fact 13. Localized snow chaos. Lake effect snow isn't just for Great Lakes. Even smaller inland lakes in Minnesota can generate their own snowstorms. One town can be under a blue sky, while the town 5 miles downwind is being buried by a localized blizzard fueled by moisture from an open patch of water. Fact 12. Survival as culture. In Minnesota, winter isn't an inconvenience. It's a way of life. The architecture, like the Minneapolis Skyway system, the food, and the social habits are all designed around sub-zero temperatures. To live here is to participate in a collective, cultural act of survival that creates a unique, stoic bond between residents. Fact 11. Urban waterfalls. Minnesota's geology is so aggressive that it refuses to be paved over. In the heart of Minneapolis, the massive Minnehaha Falls and St. Anthony Falls continue to roar. These aren't manicured park features. They're powerful geological forces that existed long before the city and will likely outlast it. Fact 10. The humble start of a giant. The Mississippi River, the fourth longest river in the world, begins at Lake Itasca. At its source, the river's so narrow and shallow that you can walk across it on a few rocks. There's no roar or drama. The artery that feeds the American continent begins as a quiet, shy stream in the Minnesota woods. Fact 9. The shifting fault lines. While not known for earthquakes, Minnesota sits on ancient fault lines like the Mid-Continent Rift. Small, quiet tremors occur more often than people realize. The ground beneath Minnesota isn't dead. It's slowly, quietly shifting, a reminder that the Earth's crust is never truly still. Fact 8. A land rebounding upward. Minnesota is still rebounding from the last ice age. The glaciers were so heavy they pushed the crust down into the mantle. Now that the weight is gone, the land is slowly rising back up, like a foam mattress after someone stands up. The state is literally growing taller by a few millimeters every year. Fact 7. The last of the true darkness. Northern Minnesota contains the Boundary Waters, a designated international dark sky sanctuary. It's one of the few places left in the continental U.S. where you can see the stars as they were seen 1,000 years ago. The Milky Way isn't a faint streak. It's a bright, textured cloud that casts a shadow. Fact 6. The physicality of silence. In the Boundary Waters canoe area, motors are banned. The only way to travel is by human power, paddle and portage. In this million-acre wilderness, the silence becomes so complete it starts to feel physical, a heavy presence that forces you to listen to the rhythm of your own breath. Fact 5. Freshwater time capsules. Lake Superior is so cold and low in bacteria that it doesn't eat shipwrecks. Wooden ships from the 1800s sit at the bottom in near-perfect condition, with their paint still visible and ropes still coiled on deck. They aren't ruins. They're perfectly preserved museum pieces resting in the dark. Fact 4. The fury of the inland ocean. Lake Superior is a lake in name only. It creates its own weather, including gales with 30-foot waves that can sink 700-foot ore carriers. During a storm, the North Shore feels like the coast of the Atlantic, proving that Minnesota has a sea of its own. Fact 3. The 10,000 lakes understatement. Minnesota's license plates say 10,000 lakes, but the actual number of lakes over 10 acres is 11,842. If you count every pond and wetland, the number is closer to 100,000. There are so many lakes that thousands remain unnamed, unvisited, and entirely untouched by human activity. Fact 2. The bulldozed landscape. Everything you see in Minnesota, every hill, every lake, every river valley, was created by a massive sheet of ice 2 miles thick. The glaciers acted like a planetary-scale bulldozer, scraping the land flat and carving the basins that now hold the state's water. Minnesota is the literal footprint of the Ice Age. Fact 1. More shoreline than California. The most insane fact about Minnesota is its scale of water. If you tally up the shorelines of its 11,000 lakes and its thousands of miles of rivers, Minnesota has more shoreline than the entire Pacific coast of California. It's a state that pretends to be land, but in reality is a vast, intricate network of water, a freshwater empire hidden in the heart of the continent. Minnesota doesn't overwhelm you with mountains or oceans. It slowly absorbs you with its patience, its silence, and its impossible scale. Its insanity lies in the details that emerge only when you slow down and look. If this journey revealed a side of the North you didn't expect, like this video, subscribe, and share the fact that surprised you the most. Be sure to check out our other videos that dive deeper into our other northern states. Until next time, keep exploring the places where reality runs a little deeper on Around the World.